lives one day at a time. Kimmy Kim and Elations Radio. They're here to get your day going fine. Kimmy Kim and Elations Radio. Kimmy Kim and Elations Radio. Kimmy Kim and Elations Radio. And here's your host, Miss Kim Rodney.
Ordinary person, living life on the edge of expectation. Ever since my life took on a new direction, I've been living life contrary to condemnation. Because God, you had mercy on me. You revealed your son in me. Opened my eyes and now I see to live my life more abundantly. I'm walking by faith and not by sight, in your power and not my own might, and I live to die, so you can increase and I decrease. You are wonderful, tremendous, yes you are, exceptional, and I see, but I see so differently, and I know that from death to life, changing my position. I no longer live in hate, but in love. I'm living in opposition. I was lost, but now I'm found. Doing things my way, now I live to do what you say. And the times I thought I knew what to do, I now know you know things through and through. You are.
All right.
Yes, you are. Exceptional. Yes, you are. And I see, but I see so differently. And I know that I must die. Hey, hey. To receive, I must give. It's the opposite. Opposite.
hello, hello, and hello. Welcome to Crises. This is our radio program that's all about survivors. It's all about survivors, people who have come through some hard times, people who have found themselves at a place where they were actually able to look back and say to other people in a testimony form or helping some other folks. This program is about celebrating you as a survivor. Now, tonight, I am your host, Dr. Rodney Pearson, and I'm here actually broadcasting out of the Los Angeles Hilton Hotel. I'm really looking forward to this program tonight because we're going to be talking about some very serious stuff. I was born in this city, Los Angeles, even though I live in Arizona right now. Born in the city of Los Angeles. And one of the most vivid memories that I have being born in Los Angeles is the L.A. Watts riots. The L.A. Watts riots. That's one of the most vivid memories that I have. For me, it's vivid for a few reasons. One, because the city was in an uproar. I can still remember seeing the flames in the background. I was a kid, and I could see the flames just kind of glaring through my window at night as I was asleep. The flames of the city being burned as the rioters and protesters, and the whole thing was a major racial riot. Now, some of you who may be young don't remember the Watts riot. Some of you, maybe you don't even have a clue of what was going on back in the time that this whole thing was happening. It was about 1965, 1964, and there were a couple things that were going on. But I tell you, it was a tremendous time to see what was going on in the life of the city, in the life of the people. There were some people who genuinely, when they were going through what they were going through, it was several things going on. Robert F. Kennedy had been killed. Martin Luther King was killed, and the racial tension in the community all around us was extremely high. I can remember vividly just kind of being this kid and not knowing totally what was going on. I remember my sister, whose birthday happened to be I'm sorry. I just had something just happened on the station here. Anyway, as we were on our way to the hospital for her to be born, my mother was in labor and all of these things were going on. And I remember the National Guard stopping us and actually searching the car while my mother was in labor. We were in Compton, and it was frightful. It was tremendously frightful. And as a kid, I was frightened at the top, but it was amazing. But with all of that has happened, that was the 60s. That was the 60s, and here we are now in the 2017 year of our Lord, and yet we are still looking at racial divides, racial riots that are just a mess, just a mess. And so we're going to talk about that tonight, and I'm hoping that you'll call in. I'm going to give you the phone number again. The number is 646-564-9842. Again, 646-564-9842. And you can give us a call, and we certainly want to hear from you and hear your experience. And how did you survive just racial tension? I've got a couple of stories that I'm going to be sharing with you. As I said, I'm here in Los Angeles. I'm upstairs in the luxurious Los Angeles Hilton Hotel. But Los Angeles has not always been a place of so much luxury, all right? There's been many, many hot spots, if you will, flash points of racial tension. The whole Reginald Denny story that we know about that took place right at the Rodney King uprising, as many people say, when those 4 policemen were found not guilty, and the city just went into an uproar of just people couldn't believe it. What was going on? The racial tension was high, and the city was just on fire. Again, South Central LA was the flashpoint. And as it was going forward, I remember talking to people, calling, and are you okay, and checking with my mom, are you all right? Because I lived in a city about an hour away from Los Angeles. But so many people can remember that time. So many people remember that day, as I do, that it was tremendous, watching the news and seeing just the city that's burning. For me, I had the memory of a watch riot. Then I had the memory of this particular. They didn't even call it a riot. They call it uprising, if you will. But it was terrible. Los Angeles has many different types of, if you will, racial climates and racial factions. There's Hispanics, there are blacks, there are whites, and there are Asians. It is a big melting pot of different racial mixtures, and so it's kind of almost like easy to cause the kind of racial tension. Easy to see it happening. I even remember at the last uprising with the Rodney King thing. I remember the Koreans just being afraid that because there were people that just wanted to tear down their buildings, and people wanted to burn their buildings. Some people, store owners, had to put up on their windows that this was a black-owned business so that people would not come in and not violate their building or not burn their building. When we think about all of the whole issues where, young black men have been killed, and we see that happening and cause a lot of racial tension. And then here we are now looking at Charlottesville. And right there, here we are with people who are just divided about the whole issue. Some people are feeling like it was the fault of white people, and others feeling it was the fault of black people. Some feel it was the fault of white supremacists. And then others feel like it was the Black Lives Matter. And, there's so much tension that goes on that it's just shameful to hear and to see the kinds of things that are taking place. So tonight we just kind of want to take a little, a look at this. And I'm on Facebook Live, so if those of you on Facebook Live with me, you can make a statement on Facebook Live. I'll read the statement on the radio here. But if we have anyone that's on the line, I'm sure our producers will let us know, and we'll be more than happy to engage you tonight, all right? Now, I'm going to tell you a little story about what happened to me as a young man. I got the best job that I had ever had as a young man. I was in my early 20s and had a young family. And with this young family, I was trying to raise them up, of course, and got a good job at a well-known company, a big company, a company that if I said the name, many of you would just immediately know this company. But I got a job there as this was a company that took groceries to retail markets so that they could sell it out of their stores, and it was a wholesaler. So you might want to think about that. You might guess it. I'm not going to tell you anymore, other than there was a wholesaler. And I would take food to different stores. I would drop off sodas. I'd drop off packaged goods, all of these things. I'd fill my van up every morning and go out into the streets of L.A. and make these deliveries. Well, I remember vividly being called to the side by the owner, and or I should say the manager. And the manager saying to me, we just want to talk to you. You're kind of going a little slow. We need you to pick it up. You need to deliver. And I thought I was doing great because I was delivering according to schedule. And I would get this seeming like nothing I could do was good enough. It just seemed like there was always a problem with everything I did. Finally, one day, after a few months of working there, the manager called me in, and the manager said, listen, we're going to have to let you go. And I was extremely disappointed. Going to have to let me go. It was a good job. It was a job that had benefits. It was a job that, I made more money than I ever made before. And, of course, we're talking about, this was probably 30 years ago. Could have been, look, I'm 60 now, so it could have been 40 years ago. But I never will forget how bad I felt losing that job. As I lost the job and I was walking out the door, the whole group of other workers who were there with me, those guys sat on the side, and I thought that maybe they would come and shake my hand and wish me luck and what have you. But, it didn't happen like that at all. In fact, what those guys did was they began to cheer and laugh and call me out of my name as I was walking out of the shop. And that's when I realized that everybody was in on this except for me. Everybody knew what was going on. I was the only black person that worked there, and everybody in that shop, all of the other workers, all of the other guys knew what was going on except for me. It was extremely painful, and I left there saying to myself, wow, this must be what it feels like to be let go of a job just because of your skin color. I don't know what they knew. All I know is that no one ever came up to me and said, hey, man, do you need some help? They all stayed away from me. And says, hey, you need to watch out for this, because I would pull the orders and load up my van and have them all set up on pallets so that I could deliver them everywhere. But no one ever came to me and said, is there anything I can do to help you? It was extremely painful. It was extremely painful. But when I think about it, there were many, many more people who had gone through the same kinds of things as I went through. I can tell you this, I survived. I can tell you that because you know what it made me do? It made me say to myself that I never want to be in a position where I have to take a job, any job, just so that I can make a little money. I went back to school from there. I joined the Army, and I went back to school, and I began to work so that I could get the education I needed so that I could make more money, so that I would have the opportunity and the chance to be able to compete. Now, I went back to school, and I got my associate's degree with a psychology major and a music minor. I went back to school. I got my bachelor's degree. I got it in psychology. I got a master's degree in ministry. I have a master's degree in professional counseling as well. So what happened to me was that opportunity, that thing that took place, it made me say that I wanted more education. I got a doctorate degree in ministry, and then tomorrow, the reason I'm in L.A. tonight is because tomorrow I'm going to be honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award. I'll be receiving a doctorate in theology. So I'm very excited about that as well. And I feel so honored that I would be recognized for the work I've done. But most people don't know that I've had exposure to. I remember marching for civil rights during the time that that whole incident with Rodney King and Reginald Denny. I keep saying Reginald Denny because that's the most vivid image I have, is the helicopters hovering over Florence, and I think it was Florence and Normandy, and Reginald King was just being dragged out of his truck. He was just an innocent truck driver just passing through the neighborhood, and the riots erupted, and they dragged him out, and I remember him being kicked and being beaten, all of that stuff that took place during that time. It was a terrible time. It was a terrible time. And I think that for me, I realized that, wow, this was happening right down the street. This was not something that I was reading about that was, just miles away in another country. It wasn't something that was happening in another state. It was right here where I was born in Los Angeles, California. But I marched in there. I remember marching in the front of the line. We had a civil rights march, and I think that what it did for me, if you will, I think it gave me a sense that people need to be involved in what's going on around them. And I stopped thinking about just what I was doing in my life. I wrote a play called You Can't Keep a Good Woman Down. I started working harder for women's rights and women's equality. I just started pushing myself because I realized that, man, our society is just kind of going downhill because the people who are greedy, people who want to have things their way, people who want power, people who want to feel that they are the ones who are in control of everything. Yeah, that's my experience. That's what happened to me. If you want to talk about your experience, you can call in to 646-564-9842. That's Elation Radio, Blog Talk Radio for Elation Magazine, 646-564-9842. And we want to talk about what happened with you if you're a survivor of crisis, right? Now, what I want to share with you tonight, one of the issues that's going on in Charlottesville is the issue of who is wrong and who is right. A lot of that has to do with because our President of the United States, made some statements, and those statements were very offensive for a lot of people. Now, I want to just kind of share a little bit my opinion on this. I did put something on Facebook, but I want to share my opinion of what I saw, the way I interpret what happened. It might be different in the way you feel. And if you're on Facebook, you are welcome to text, or you can call in. Either way that you want to do it is fine. I'll give you the number one more time because it could be a heated conversation here. 646-564-9842. That's 646-564-9842. Just share with our producers what you want to share, and then we'll let you on the line. Anyway, Charlottesville. What is about Charlottesville? Well, people came together, city came together and decided that the statue of Robert E. Lee, General Robert E. Lee, that the statue was no longer appropriate for the display where it was, okay? The city decided this. This was not any outsiders or anything like that. This was their own city council who made that decision. Well, they let the community know what was going on, and the community, some people decided that they wanted to protest that. And so what took place was, of course, in the middle of that protest, the person who decided to put the protest on is a known white supremacist. So what that person did was, apparently, the word got out. And the word got out to people all over the country who showed up, and there were KKK members there, Ku Klux Klan. There were other groups that were radical white groups like Nazi groups and other kinds of groups who came together. And when those groups came together, it was a protest. Now, what it was supposed to be was a protest about the Robert E. Lee statue. That's what the protest was supposed to be about. People who wanted to see the statue remain. Now, I understand that some of those people who grew up there in the South, they wanted that statue to remain because it was a part of the landscape, of that city. And so people wanted it to stay there. People wanted to see it. And so they resented, the removal of it. And those are people, obviously, who didn't go to the city council meeting, or maybe people who, didn't have much to say. But whatever the situation was, they did not come to that to the meetings where the decision was being made. Well, what happened was that all of these, I guess, anti-justice, I don't know what you want to call it, but these groups came together. These white groups, these white entitled, superior thinking, whatever you want to call it. Maybe some of them were just people who didn't want to see the statue down, but on Friday night, that's not what you saw. You saw people chanting that you will not replace us. You will not replace us. Talking about Jews will not replace us. That had nothing to do with Robert E. Lee. But they were seeing, and you saw pictures and videos of them with all kinds of tiki torches and all of that. I mean, it looked like miles and miles of protest, from looking at it from the videotape. And the people seemed to be angry and passionate as they began to express their opinions. And that was on Friday night. Again, I didn't hear anything from the video, from what the media presented. I didn't hear anything about Robert Lee. Nothing at all about what the general had done or the general had not done. Now, anybody who knows anything about the history of Robert E. Lee and the general of the Confederate Army knows that one of the things that he did was he was fighting for slavery to be maintained. He was fighting against the Union, all right? He was fighting against the Union. He wanted slavery to be in place forever, as far as he was concerned. He wanted segregation, the whole issue of black people, they're being separated from their families, black people who had been brought over from Africa, and some of them who had, by this time, had been born right here in the United States, but they were treated like second-class citizens. They didn't have the right to vote. They didn't have the right to claim land for themselves. They didn't have the right to speak up and share their opinions. They didn't have the right to do any of these things, all right? And so these black people, for the most part, General Robert E. Lee felt that, you know what, the best place for you is to remain as a slave, and we're going to treat our slaves real good. We're going to treat our slaves, and we're going to make sure that they have a good plantation to work on. The only problem is that those slaves did not have the right to be able to choose anything for themselves. And so it was a blatant violation of the Constitution, but General Robert E. Lee fought against that. He wanted to keep slavery in place. Now, I don't know if the people who were in Charlottesville who erected that statue knew about General Robert E. Lee and his past. Apparently, there are many, many statues that are being questioned because the statues were erected because they spoke of
an ordinary person, living life on the edge of expectation. Ever since my life took on a new direction, I've been living life contrary to condemnation. Because God, you had mercy on me. You revealed your son in me. Opened my eyes and now I see. To live my life more abundantly. I'm walking by faith and not by sight. In your power and not my own might. And I live.
And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. When you think about a statue that was erected to honor a man who was against the Union, of the United States, who was against releasing slaves, a man who was absolutely 100% for the second-class citizenship of black people all over the country. When you think about that, why would you want to display? Now, some people say, well, it's because of the history of the South. Okay, fine. But I agree with many of the proponents of bringing those things down who say, well, put it where it belongs. If it's part of history, put it in a museum. If it's part of history, recognize it as being a part of history. We don't want to display that these things are not necessarily a part of a history we're proud of. You know, we have so many people who have done wonderful things in our country, people who have done great things, and whom we can memorialize, who we can build statues about, people who have done things that have released folk from bondage, people who have fought against some of the discrimination and some of the terrible things that have happened in our history. Those are people that you want to try to put up a statue for. But instead, we choose a Stonewall Jackson, or we choose a General Robert E. Lee. What is wrong with question? And I think that that's what the people who protested against those folk who were there to say, let's leave the statue up. Now, again, as I said, I don't know whether it's a media bias, but I never saw anything. I'm not there in Charlottesville. I am here in Arizona. Well, right now I'm in Los Angeles, but I was in Arizona when it came down. So I never saw those who were protesting against the removal of the Robert E. Lee statue. I never heard a word from them. All right? And so here they were. These people were there. These people were saying that it's our right. Maybe that was the issue. It was their right. Maybe they felt like it was their right to be able to keep that statue up. But I want to tell you something. If in my neighborhood of Compton, where I'm from, gangs were prevalent, where the gangs tried to rule the city, if there was a statue in the middle of Compton that was a statue of a Crip, a Blood, a Pyru gang member, all of those block boys, and there were all kinds of people, gang members. If there was a statue in the middle of that city that determined that these guys were heroes, or guys that were worthy to have some kind of honor bestowed upon them with a statue, we feel. I know for me, I would not feel that it was right. I would not feel that it was something that was deserving. If there was a statue of some other criminal, let's put I can't even remember the guy who Ted, I think his first name was, who the Oklahoma City bomber. I don't remember his name offhand, but I remember them not even wanting to mention his name. And other people, they don't even want to talk about his name, let alone a statue that we put in the middle of our city, that we build a park around, that we name streets after, just because he's from the South or just because he's from an area? I would say how selfish it is for people who would want, just because this person was white, why would we want to put that person and make them historic if it were not an issue of race? All right? I wonder, do the same people want to put Mary McLeod Bethune? Do they want to put a statue of her in the place of Robert E. Lee? People who really put their lives on the line so that people could have a life. They were running from slavery. They were running and trying to hide and trying to find a place of refuge, trying to avoid that serious type of injustice that was going on. No. They want Robert E. Lee, all right, or some other types of statues of people. Now, that's what that issue was about in Charlottesville. Okay? Now, here's what the news reported. The news reported that what was going on is that with those statues being built, with those statues up, the news reported that there was some violence that went on. Now, I've never heard the news say who threw the first punch. I never heard the news say who did what or what happened. Never heard the news say that. But people say that one group was just as guilty as the other. And most of the time, the people who say that one group was just as guilty as the other, they imply that the other group, like Black Lives Matter and, these other black groups, that they were the ones who incited. They were the ones who started it. Yet there's no proof of that. We haven't heard it. We haven't seen it. How do we know that it wasn't somebody from the other side? How do we know that it wasn't a KKK member who may have hit one of the Black Lives Matter people first? How do we know? We don't know. So the issue is not about the violence. The issue is about the principal cause of the violence. I wrote on my Facebook page that we think that because we have the right to say what we want to say, we think that because we have what do they call freedom of speech, that we can say whatever we want to say, whenever we want to say it. Freedom of speech is what people say. But you can't go into a theater and yell fire. You will go to jail if there is no fire, all right? I think that we need to put something in place similar to that. We need to put something in place that says, you know what, you do have freedom of speech. You do have a right to protest. We will give you a permit. But I think that people need to be able to say that I am protesting and I'm saying what I need to say, and they need to be able to do whatever they can, have the responsibility to not incite a riot, to not portray. How do you get up and you speak ill to even inflict some kind of bodily harm or danger on citizens of the United States just because you have a right to speak? You have a right to say what you want to say. Okay, yes, you can. I think you can share your rights. I think you can share your viewpoints. I think you can. But I think that there needs to be some limits that we need to impose on people. Now, that's my opinion. I could be wrong. I'm not a constitutionalist, so I don't really know what the law says. I'm just giving you my opinion. And I think that what we're going to see in the very near future, we're going to see other types of rallies, people coming together, protests of people who are going to want to say that I have a right to speak up. And because I have a right to speak up, I hate Jews. And I'm going to get a permit, and we are going to say, kill all the Jews. All right? I have a right to speak up. So we're going to come together, and we're going to say, I hate all gay people. Let's kill them. I have a right to say I hate all white people. Let's kill them. And we expect for people to stay in their corners and in their place and not be angry or angered, not be upset, and we don't understand that what we really have to worry about is more than just the right to speech, free speech. We have a right and a responsibility that if you go on your job, you can't say anything that you want to say. All right? We just saw today that President Trump, that he fired, if you will, Stephen Bannon. And so we know that Steve Bannon said some things about the president that the president didn't like. That's what we know, that he said some things that upset him, and he was fired. Okay? That's what happens in life. That you think you can say, you know, there's free speech, but there are consequences to free speech. And those consequences sometimes are harder to pay for than anything else. Those consequences can cause more damage than the good that you think. All right? So you got to be aware of that. You got to be aware that those consequences can be damaging. That's what I want you to hear. So what we saw in Charlottesville was consequences. Yes, you can say, well, both parties are guilty. You could say that. But let me ask you this question. If there was a rapist and that rapist was killed by the victim, would you say, well, they were both violent? Would you say that one person both people should have been criminalized, or should have been the whole thing as it was adjudicated, that it should have been adjudicated in such a way that that rapist was guilty? The victim was guilty. So we have a tendency to get our legal issues. We find legal loopholes. You know, there was a guy who was trying to rob a store. And he was trying to break in. It was a burglar. He was trying to break in. And as he was trying to break in, he fell through the roof. The roof wasn't secure. Guess what he did? He tried to sue the store owner, saying that his rights were violated, his safety was violated. He shouldn't have been behind the ceiling in the first place. He had a right to safety. See, we've got to come to a place where we understand that some people bring upon themselves the consequences that are not so fine. Consequences that are sometimes very painful. Sometimes a whole generation can be affected. We have a responsibility, yes, but we have a responsibility to be aware of the fact that if I stand in the middle of Los Angeles, California, and I decide that I wanted to curse the entire city, and I wanted to say I hate Mexicans, and I hate white people, and I hate this, and I hate that, and they all should die, and I have a gun and have a club and all that kind of stuff, there might be consequences. And so did we incite a riot? You may have. Who is the one that should pay for that? The person who was the victim that you pointed to, that you called out, or is it the person who said, I have a right to say what I want to say? Yeah, I think all of these things are being challenged, they're being questioned, and we're getting to the place where we need to find out and say to ourselves, Black lives matter, white lives matter, and the Asian lives matter, and Mexicans' lives matter. Yeah, we do. They do. But if a person who is black says that because he sees that the people in his particular community and his particular race have the highest rate, have the highest levels of incarceration and death and killings from police. And so he is simply trying to say, listen, you guys, don't treat us like we don't matter. Treat us like everybody else. That's what he's trying to say. Well, maybe we should listen. If he's trying to say that there's systemic issues that are against black people and that the science proves it out, what's wrong with a person being able to say, yeah, black lives do matter? He's not trying to exclude other lives. He's trying to include his life. Now, I'm not a member of Black Lives Matter. I'm not an advocate of Black Lives Matter, if you will. I don't publicly advocate for them. I'm just simply saying that you got to understand what the principle is behind what people are saying. Now, I understand people who are white supremacists who want to say, listen, we want to preserve white people. We want to preserve, you have a right to want to preserve white people. But do you have a right to want to preserve power and white entitlement if it discriminates against other people? That's the issue. Yes, you can keep your race as pure and lily white as you want to. You have a right to do that, and if that's where you are, that's no problem. But when you say you can't replace us, meaning that you can't take away our power, well, then that's a whole other issue. When you say you can't replace us because you're saying we don't want you in our political system governing us, when you say you can't replace us because you don't want to see your jobs taken away from people who are just as qualified as you are, or maybe even more qualified, if that's your beef, if that's what you're saying, then you got to rethink it. You got to understand that America is changing and that minorities are coming out and they're getting more education and they're being qualified in different areas. And so you can't just say, because you don't want to lose power, you can't just say you won't replace us. Our country is going through a phase, if you will, of evolution. And in this evolutionary process, we're seeing that the people who were the powers to be, that they're being they're conflicted because they were used to a certain group of people who were empowered, who were like them. They lived across the street, down the block, and they were their friends and all of that kind of stuff. But listen, the issue becomes greed. The issue becomes I don't want people who are trying to stand up against me, I don't want them to win. And so if you want to make America great again, that's what you want to do. If you're behind making America great, you need to find out what are the pieces of America that were great. That's what you got to fight for. Are you fighting for America being great because superiority? Is that the America being great that you're fighting for? And there might be some people who are listening to this that I'm saying right now, and they're nodding their heads, yes, that's what we mean when we say America great. There might be people who are saying, yes, when we say America great, we want to take it back to the day when there was a sense of entitlement. We want to take it back to the day when there was a sense of when a white person walked in the room, when a white person made an application for a job, that he had a greater opportunity of being able to get that job than a black person. Yes, if that's what you want to do when you say make America great, then you need to understand that it will never return. And there can be protest after protest, and you can keep saying that you don't want to we're not going to be replaced, and Jews can't replace us, and all of that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is things are changing, and that people are becoming more educated, people are becoming more competitive, and that black people are just as intelligent, if not more. Some of those people have just as ingenious ideas and creativity, and they have talent, and you can't say to them that just because their color is different, you can't replace us. There must be a sense of when I progress, when I gain some level of profit, it's not because of my skin color. It's not because of my heritage title. It is because I've done something to earn it. Just like Martin Luther King said, that they will not be judged for their skin color, but their character. All right? That they will be judged because they work just as hard. And that's what the issue has to be. And that's what survivors should be talking about, is how they made it through. My mother's a survivor. My dad was a survivor. My grandfather was a survivor. That these are people who dealt with the racial injustice. My mother went to school. She got her bachelor's and got her master's degree. She got her bachelor's down at Alabama A&M. I remember how I felt when I went down to that college. I just wanted to see where my mother went to school, because my mother grew up in a very small town, Clanton, Alabama. I wanted to go to Huntsville. I happened to be going to school down there, and when I realized, wow, I'm in the same city where my mother got her bachelor's degree, I went to the campus, and I felt a sense of pride. I'm on the same campus that my mother walked. I'm on the same campus where my mother was able to go and to be a part of what was happening. I wanted to be there. I wanted to feel what she felt. I wanted to be in that environment. Yes, a lot of historical black colleges have a lot to speak about, and they're being taught their history. They're being taught what they had to go through in order to be able to receive accreditation, or to be able to get land and be able to raise those students up to understand what it was to be a black man or a black woman in a country. These are issues that are still going on. Now, I know a lot of our millennials. I know a lot of our millennials and different generations, don't quite get it. They don't quite understand it. But, man, I just want you to know that we have to be the ones to say, you know what? Those of us with a little gray in our beards, those of us who have had some experiences, we've got to be the ones to let people know what happened in our history. And our history doesn't have to be a negative history. Our history doesn't have to be a history that's full of shame and always being left out in the cold and second class. But there are some people. I had the opportunity just a couple of months ago. I went to Washington, D.C., and I went to the Black History Museum. I got a chance to walk around and feel some hurt as I read and saw what some people had to go through. Then I went to Maryland, and I went to the school that Frederick Douglass founded. It was a school so that black people could have the same opportunities. And I went and I stood by the statue. Now, you're talking about a statue. Not a statue of somebody who killed somebody, not a statue of somebody who hurt somebody, who wanted to take advantage of somebody. Not that statue. It was a statue of a man who wanted to help people who were disenfranchised, people who were beat, people who were said that they could not have the same opportunities. And I stood there and I looked at that statue, and tears came to my eyes as I just began to read there was an if you will, not the kind on the graveyard, but it was just a statement about, not the kind on a gravesite, but it was a statement about Frederick Douglass. And as I began to read about Frederick Douglass, and I just got another sense of pride. I am a black man who is proud of the efforts that our people have gone through because of the obstacles that they faced. Yes, white people went through a lot too, but most of their obstacles, if you will, were maybe Lewis and Clark going against adverse weather conditions. Yeah, they faced Indians, but they faced Indians who felt that they were being threatened because they were trying to impose on the land. All right? Indians didn't go out searching for white people so that they could say to them, we're going to kill you because of the color of your skin. Right. We live in a society. We live in a culture. We live in a time where there's a lot going on. But we also live in a time where there are lots of survivors. There are a lot of people who made it in spite of those obstacles. There are a lot of people who on a daily basis were put down, who were told they couldn't go to school. They couldn't enter a white school because of the color of their skin. They were spit on. Rocks were thrown at them. All of those things happened to them just because they wanted to get an education that they were entitled to. Yes, these are the kinds of things that our people faced. These are the kinds of things that our people went through. And we've got to understand that when people go through things like that, when people face things like that, they are entitled to be able to stand up so that other people don't have to go through it. That was what that protest was about. Why did Black Lives Matter show up? Why did these anti-nationalists show up? They were simply trying to say, you know what? We're not going back. You're not going to take from us what we've worked hard to try to achieve. And we will fight. And we will fight hard against anybody who says that because of the color of our skin, we are not entitled to equality. Because of the color of our skin, we are not entitled to fair treatment. Because of the color of our skin, we are not entitled to be able to have just as many opportunities as anyone else. No. That's what they were there for. That's what they were standing up against. They weren't saying we hate white people. They weren't saying we hate neo-Nazi groups and we hate KKK. They weren't saying that. That was not the stance at all. They were simply trying to say, what you stand for to eradicate anybody or any race that is not like you. We have to say to you, we will not stand by the side, stand alongside. We will not just stand idle and just allow this kind of perpetration to take place. Yeah, maybe there were some bad people. Maybe there were some bad people on both sides. But let's not forget what the issue was. Let's not forget that a woman died who was not black, who died because she needed to make a statement, because she was there to say, this is unfair. The program is about survivors, people who are going to make it, who made it, people who stood up for their rights. And I'm glad that I would have an opportunity to share this tonight. This is a special segment. Next week, next Friday, we'll go back and we'll talk to some real survivors. You won't have to hear me talk for the whole hour. But I'm glad that we have this opportunity. This is what free speech is all about. Not spewing hatred, not spewing opinions that are anti-equality, but trying to bring our world together. Trying to say to people all over that we are free and that people who died for this freedom, even people who just died this weekend or last weekend, died for freedom, that we will all have a chance for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that's guaranteed to us as being citizens of this great United States of America. So that's the end of our show. I bid you farewell. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our Facebook audience, those who were with us. Thank you so much. And I hope that the things that I've shared and tried to share tonight, I hope that they are a blessing to you. Have a great and wonderful day. God bless. Agape always.
Hallelujah. Yeah. Hallelujah. glory, God, be to ya. Hallelujah, glory, hallelujah. All glory, God, be to ya. Hallelujah, glory, hallelujah. All glory, God, be to ya. Hallelujah, glory, hallelujah. All glory, God, be to ya. Hallelujah, glory, hallelujah. All glory, God, be to ya. Hallelujah, glory, hallelujah. Hallelujah. All glory, God, be to ya. Hallelujah, glory, hallelujah. Hallelujah. All glory, God, be to ya, Lord. Hallelujah, glory, hallelujah. All glory, God. Can you hear what I hear? The angels rejoicing, 'cause the King is here. Can you hear what I hear? The angels rejoicing, 'cause the King is here. Oh, say hallelujah, glory, hallelujah. All glory, God, we magnify you and give you all praise. God, you deserve all glory, all of the glory, Lord. Hallelujah, glory, hallelujah. Yeah. Can you hear what I hear? The angels rejoicing. Oh, 'cause God is here. Yeah. 'Cause the King is here. Oh, my heart magnifies you, Lord. 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 Everybody say, my heart magnifies you, Lord. Oh, my heart magnifies you. My heart magnifies you, Lord. I give you all the glory and all the praise. Magnifies you, when I think of the goodness, God, and all that you've done for me, my soul cries out, hallelujah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, God, this worship is flowing from my heart, God. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Thank you for grace, mercy. Oh, hallelujah.